Ah, there's a reason the reaction to you sounds exaggerated, overblown, almost hysterical. Stop existing like that. As if existence itself could violate a rule. As if simply occupying space in your own skin could be classified as a crime. That reaction isn't about drama, it's about exposure. Because nothing panics a system faster than something it can't regulate, can't predict, and can't discipline without admitting it was never neutral to begin with. And you walked in without asking how to behave. You didn't shout. You didn't demand attention. You didn't declare yourself important. You didn't posture. You didn't perform pain for sympathy or insecurity for approval. You just existed, calm, present, unbothered. And that's where everything started going wrong for them, because systems are not threatened by aggression. They are threatened by non-compliance that doesn't announce itself. Aggression can be punished. Resistance can be labeled. But quiet autonomy, that's harder. That slips through filters. That doesn't trip alarms until it's already too late. Look closely at the language they use around you now. Your presence is illegal. Your smile is dangerous. That's not metaphor for violence. That's metaphor for contagion. They're reacting the same way institutions always react when something spreads without permission. Not because it hurts people, but because it makes control optional. You represent the possibility that a human being can be self-contained, emotionally sovereign, and still functional. That idea alone destabilizes entire belief structures. Your smile is doing more damage than rage ever could, because rage fits the script. Rage confirms the system's story that the world is hostile, unfair, and requires management. Rage justifies rules. Rage gives authorities something to point at. But your smile, calm, neutral, unafraid, that smile doesn't ask for protection or validation. It doesn't signal submission. It doesn't broadcast need. It doesn't say, "Please accept me." It says nothing. And that silence is what scares them. Systems depend on visible anxiety. They run on it. Anxiety makes people check themselves. Anxiety makes people hesitate. Anxiety makes people ask for permission. Anxiety makes people grateful for approval. Your smile is dangerous because it signals none of that. It says you are not negotiating your existence. You are not waiting for feedback. You are not scanning the room to see how much of yourself is allowed. And when people see that, something uncomfortable happens inside them. A question surfaces, a quiet one. A question they were trained never to ask. If they can exist like that, why am I still performing? That's where the panic comes from. Not from you being special, but from you being ordinary in a way that was supposed to be impossible. Calm without authority, confidence without permission, presence without apology. You didn't overthrow anything. You didn't rebel. You didn't break rules loudly. You simply failed to obey rules that were never written down. Rules everyone else silently agreed to follow because it made life easier. And by not following them, you exposed that agreement for what it was, optional. This is how civilizations actually collapse. Not with fire, not with invasions, but when enough people realize the rules they're living under were maintained by habit, fear, and mutual pretending. When belief erodes, power dissolves. And belief erodes fastest when someone demonstrates an alternative without preaching it. You didn't tell anyone to wake up. You didn't give speeches. You didn't post manifestos. You just lived in a way that made obedience look unnecessary. That's why the reaction feels absurd. Illegal in 69 countries. It's satire on the surface, but psychologically precise underneath. Because systems don't know how to categorize someone who isn't asking for a role. You're not the rebel. Rebels still define themselves in opposition. You're worse. You're uninterested. You're disengaged from the emotional economy that keeps people trading approval for safety. And once someone sees that as an option, they can't unsee it. Watch how people behave around you now. There's a recalibration happening, micro-hesitations, overthinking simple interactions, a strange politeness mixed with distance. That's not respect yet. That's uncertainty. You don't fit the existing map. They don't know where to place you, and humans are deeply uncomfortable when their categorization systems fail. Categories are how control is maintained. When someone can't be categorized, they become unpredictable. Unpredictability is read as danger, even when it's peaceful. That's why your calm gets mislabeled as arrogance. Your boundaries get labeled as coldness. Your neutrality gets framed as superiority. Not because those labels are accurate, but because they restore hierarchy. They allow the observer to put you back in a box where they feel safe. Oh, they think they're better. That story is comforting. It means the system still works. It means nothing fundamental has changed. But deep down, they know that's not it. If it were arrogance, they'd recognize the pattern. Arrogance performs. You're not performing. Your presence is a problem because it doesn't feed the machine. You don't provide the expected emotional signals. You don't over-explain. You don't self-deprecate to make others comfortable. You don't rush to reassure people that you're harmless. You don't flatten yourself to fit the room. You let the room adjust instead. And most rooms were never built for that. They were built to contain, not to adapt. Here's the part most people miss. You didn't choose this to make a statement. This wasn't strategy. This wasn't rebellion. This was self-alignment. You stopped managing perception. You stopped performing relatability. You stopped diluting your reactions to keep social peace. You stopped editing yourself in real time. And when you do that, something shifts. Your nervous system exits negotiation mode. You stop broadcasting need. You stop signaling availability for control. That's when systems lose leverage. Because control requires hooks. Emotional hooks, guilt, fear, desire for approval, need for belonging. When those hooks aren't there, influence collapses. And influence collapsing feels like danger to people who benefited from it. That's why the language escalates. Public safety hazard. Civilization collapse. These aren't accusations. They're defensive fantasies. The mind reaching for drama to justify discomfort it can't otherwise explain. What's actually happening is simpler and more terrifying. You're reminding people of a version of themselves they abandoned. Not through words, but through contrast. They see you existing without the constant background hum of self-monitoring, and it irritates them. Not because you're wrong, but because you're right in a way that costs something. To live like you do would require them to drop excuses, confront fears, and dismantle identities built around compliance. That's expensive, psychologically expensive. So instead they label you as the problem. This is why your smile is treated like a hazard, because it communicates that you're okay without the things they rely on, without validation, without reassurance, without permission. And once that possibility enters a collective space, it spreads, not through persuasion, but through observation. Someone watches you. They notice you're not anxious, not apologetic, not shrinking. And a thought forms. What if I didn't either? That thought alone is enough to destabilize years of conditioning. You're not collapsing civilizations. You're collapsing illusions of necessity. The illusion that people must be small to be safe. The illusion that calm must be earned. The illusion that confidence must be justified. The illusion that existence requires approval. Those illusions hold up more than governments ever did. They keep people obedient at a cellular level. When one person quietly opts out, it's manageable. When others notice, it becomes a problem. That's when systems start shouting. That's when exaggeration appears. That's when jokes about illegality mask real anxiety. Because if what you're doing is allowed, then what everyone else is doing becomes a choice. And choice is dangerous to structures built on inevitability. You're not forcing anyone to change. You're just standing there, proof that another way exists. And that's enough. Notice something important. You're not recruiting followers. You're not leading a movement. You're not asking people to join you. That's why this is so effective. There's no organization to attack, no ideology to discredit, no leader to demonize. Just a person existing without the usual compromises. That kind of disruption is hard to stop because it doesn't announce itself. It doesn't demand confrontation. It doesn't give the system a clear enemy. So instead, the system turns the language up, makes it sound absurd, makes it sound extreme, tries to turn your presence into a joke, a threat, a spectacle, anything to avoid the real conversation, which is this. Why does someone being calm, self-possessed, and unapologetically present make us so uncomfortable? That question leads somewhere dangerous. That question leads inward. And inward is where most control systems fall apart. You might feel the tension around you increasing, the subtle distancing, the forced humor, the sudden seriousness when you enter a space. That's not imagination. That's recalibration. People are adjusting their behavior because the old scripts don't work on you anymore. You don't respond the way you're supposed to. You don't play your part. And when one character breaks script, the entire play feels unstable. Here's the thing they don't want to say out loud. If more people existed like you, calm, grounded, unbothered by approval, many roles would disappear overnight. Gatekeepers would lose relevance. Performative confidence would look hollow. Fear-based authority would weaken. Entire industries built on insecurity would struggle. That's why your presence feels illegal. Not because it breaks laws, but because it undermines business models of control. And you didn't even try to. That's the part that really messes with them. There's no villain motive to assign, no conspiracy, no rebellion to crush. Just someone who stopped shrinking. Someone who stopped existing in a way that made other people comfortable at the cost of their own coherence. Someone who aligned internally and let the external consequences fall where they may. This is only the first layer, the surface reaction, the jokes, the exaggeration, the public safety hazard framing. Underneath that, something else is happening. Something quieter. People are starting to monitor themselves around you, starting to notice their own flinches, their own compliance, their own fear of standing out. And once that awareness starts, it doesn't go away easily. They can laugh it off. They can label you dramatic. They can pretend it's not real. But the moment has already passed. The question has already been planted. The comparison has already been made. And comparison, once internalized, doesn't need you anymore. It works on them from the inside. That's why this feels bigger than a personal shift. It feels systemic. Because it is. Not because you're powerful in the traditional sense, but because you're unavailable in the traditional sense. Unavailable for manipulation. Unavailable for emotional leverage. unavailable for silent contracts you never signed. And this is just the beginning, because right now, they're reacting to the fact that you exist like this at all. They're still trying to name it, frame it, neutralize it with language. But once that stops working, once the presence itself becomes normalized, the real tension begins. When people stop asking, why are they like that? And start asking, why am I not? That's when the jokes stop. That's when the exaggeration fades. That's when things get complicated. Because once your presence stops being treated like a novelty and starts being treated like a variable, the system has a different problem on its hands, a deeper one. Humor is a distancing tactic. Exaggeration is denial with glitter on it. But normalization is dangerous. Normalization means people are no longer reacting emotionally, they're recalculating structurally. And systems don't fear outrage nearly as much as they fear recalculation. This is the moment where people stop watching you and start watching themselves around you. That subtle shift changes everything. They begin to notice how tense they are when they enter rooms, how often they soften their opinions before speaking, how quickly they apologize for existing too loudly, too confidently, too honestly. They notice how much of their behavior is performative, how much of it is a negotiation for safety. And they notice, with growing discomfort, that you're not doing any of that. That's when your existence stops being funny and starts being instructional. Not because you're teaching, you're not. You're not correcting anyone. You're not evangelizing. You're not trying to wake people up. You're just standing there, unedited, uncompressed, unafraid, and somehow that does more damage than 1,000 speeches ever could. Because now the system can't frame you as an exception or an anomaly. You're not loud, you're not extreme, you're not reckless, you're calm, grounded, functional. And that combination is terrifying, because it removes the excuse. As long as freedom looks chaotic, people can justify avoiding it. As long as confidence looks arrogant, people can justify staying small. As long as autonomy looks dangerous, people can justify obedience. But you don't look dangerous. You look fine. Better than fine. You look regulated. You look clear. You look like someone whose nervous system isn't constantly bracing for impact. And that's when the internal questioning turns from curiosity into threat. This is where the idea of your presence being illegal becomes more than a joke. Because legality, at its core, is about what behaviors are permitted without punishment. And while no one has written laws against calm self-possession, there are emotional laws enforced every day. Laws about how much confidence is acceptable, how much certainty is allowed, how visible your comfort with yourself can be before it's seen as provocation. You've violated those laws, not by breaking them loudly, but by ignoring them entirely. And once people realize that ignoring them is possible, the enforcement mechanisms start to fail. Guilt doesn't land the same. Shame doesn't stick. Subtle social corrections bounce off instead of sinking in. That's when institutions, groups, and even individuals start escalating their response. Not because you did something new, but because the old methods stopped working. This is where the language turns sharp. Where calm gets rebranded as arrogance. Where boundaries get reframed as hostility. Where self-respect gets mislabeled as ego. These are not observations. They're attempts to reassert control. If they can redefine your state as morally suspect, then they can restore the hierarchy. They can put you back in a category where judgment is allowed. But the problem is, the category won't hold. Because nothing about you fits the accusation. You're not dismissive. You're not cruel. You're not condescending. You're not domineering. You're just unavailable for the usual games. And people can sense that. The accusation rings hollow even as they make it. That dissonance between what they're saying and what they're perceiving creates internal friction, and friction creates heat. That's the public safety hazard they're reacting to, not you. The heat. Heat spreads. Heat changes states. Heat forces movement. And once enough heat builds up inside a system, something has to give. People start to feel restless, irritable, dissatisfied in ways they can't explain. The routines that used to soothe them stop working. The narratives that used to comfort them feel thin. And every time they see you, calm, centered, smiling like nothing is wrong, it aggravates that restlessness. Your smile becomes a mirror they didn't consent to. Because your smile doesn't say, "I'm winning." It says, "I'm okay." And for someone who's built their entire identity around striving, performing, proving, and bracing, that's unbearable. If you can be okay without all that effort, then what does that say about the effort they've been expending their entire lives? Was it necessary? Was it chosen? Or was it fear disguised as responsibility? Those are not safe questions. Civilizations don't collapse when people get angry. They collapse when people stop believing the suffering was required, when people stop believing that tension equals virtue, when people stop believing that exhaustion is the price of worth. You are a walking contradiction to those beliefs. And contradictions are destabilizing because they don't argue. They exist. That's why the reaction escalates from humor to scrutiny. People start watching you more closely, analyzing your tone, looking for cracks, waiting for inconsistency, hoping you'll slip into the familiar patterns so they can relax again. Because if you fall apart, if you burn out, if you self-sabotage, then the world makes sense again. Then the system is justified, then the rules were real. But you don't. You remain steady, not perfect, not untouchable, just steady. You handle pressure without dramatizing it. You move through conflict without imploding. You respond instead of react. And every time you do, the explanation pool gets smaller. Luck doesn't explain it anymore. Privilege doesn't quite fit. Arrogance doesn't match the data. Something else is happening. And they don't like not knowing what that something is. So the narrative shifts again. Now it's not that you're dangerous, it's that you're unnatural. Too calm, too composed, too unaffected. As if peace itself were suspicious. As if regulation were a trick. That's what happens when dysfunction has been normalized for so long that health looks fake. When chaos is the baseline, stability feels like a threat. This is the point where some people start copying you. Quietly, awkwardly, in small ways. They stop over-explaining. They pause before apologizing. They hold eye contact a second longer. They don't rush to fill silence. They experiment with not performing. And when they do, they notice something shocking. Nothing bad happens. The world doesn't end. They're not punished. They're not rejected. The fear they'd been carrying around as fact starts to look more like conditioning. That's when contagion becomes real. Not because you told them to change, but because your existence gave them permission to test the rules. And once people test rules and survive, belief erodes quickly. That's how illegal presence becomes a crisis. Not because of what you do, but because of what others start doing after being exposed to you. You become a reference point. Not a leader, not an icon, a reference point. A living data set that says, this is possible, and possibility is disruptive. Possibility makes people restless in systems designed to keep them settled. Possibility makes obedience feel like a choice rather than a duty. And once duty turns into choice, authority has to work harder to justify itself. That's when you start noticing pushback that doesn't make sense on the surface. Overreactions, misinterpretations, people reading tone where there is none, assigning intent you never had. That's not about you. That's about containment. When systems feel threatened, they try to isolate the variable, turn it into a problem, a personality issue, a character flaw, anything that keeps it from spreading. But you're hard to isolate because you're not doing anything abnormal. You show up. You speak when you have something to say. You stay quiet when you don't. You don't overextend. You don't collapse under pressure. You don't beg for inclusion. You don't chase validation. And the more mundane your behavior is, the harder it is to frame you as dangerous, even though the effect you're having is anything but mundane. This is where the phrase, single-handedly collapsing civilizations, stops being hyperbole and starts being a diagnosis. Because civilizations at their core are shared agreements about reality, about what's normal, about what's acceptable, about what's required. And when those agreements are challenged by lived example rather than ideology, they weaken fast. You're not offering an alternative belief system, you're offering an alternative state of being. And states of being are harder to argue with. People can debate ideas, they can attack theories, they can ridicule philosophies, but they can't easily debate someone's regulated nervous system. They can't easily argue with someone who isn't flinching. They can't easily dismiss someone who isn't trying to win. That's why the tension around you feels strange, unnamed, diffuse, like something is wrong but no one can point to the cause. That's the hallmark of structural disruption. You may feel it too. The sense that interactions have more weight now, that conversations linger longer, that people are more careful with their words around you. Not because you're intimidating, but because they feel observed. Not by you, but by themselves. Your presence amplifies self-awareness, and self-awareness is uncomfortable in cultures built on distraction. This is also where the loneliness can creep in, because as you become harder to categorize, you become harder to relate to. Not because you've changed personalities, but because you've exited the shared performance. The small talk feels thinner. The mutual complaining feels off. The bonding through insecurity stops working. You're not above it. You're just not in it anymore. And that gap can feel heavy. But understand this, the gap isn't between you and others. It's between states, between unconscious compliance and conscious choice. You didn't leave people behind. You stepped into a different mode of being. Some will follow, some will resist, some will pretend nothing happened. But the shift has already occurred. You can't unknow what you know now. You can't unfeel what regulation feels like. You can't unsee how much of the world runs on unexamined fear. That's why going back isn't really an option. You could perform again. You could soften. You could shrink. You could resume broadcasting the signals that keep everyone comfortable. But it would feel wrong in your body. Your nervous system wouldn't cooperate. You've tasted coherence. And coherence makes incoherence intolerable. Not morally, physiologically. Your system knows when it's lying now. This is the phase where your existence becomes quietly political, even if you want nothing to do with politics. Because politics, at its root, is about how people organize power, behavior, and legitimacy. And you're reorganizing those things just by being consistent with yourself. You're demonstrating that authority doesn't have to come from force, fear, or hierarchy. It can come from alignment. That's destabilizing, so expect the pressure to increase. Not dramatically, subtly. Expect people to test you, to poke, to see if you'll react, to see if they can pull you back into familiar emotional patterns. Not because they hate you, but because they need reassurance that the world still works the way they think it does. Your reaction would confirm that. Your non-reaction keeps the question open. And open questions are dangerous, because open questions don't resolve. They linger, they spread, they infect conversations you're not even part of. Someone leaves a room with you and starts noticing things. Someone hears about you and wonders. Someone compares themselves without meaning to. That's how influence actually works. Not through force, through contrast. You don't need to do anything differently. In fact, doing something would weaken it. Explanation would dilute it. Defense would legitimize the accusation. Overexpression would make it look performative. The power here is in your refusal to manage other people's interpretations. You let them have their reactions. You let them sit with their discomfort. You let the system reveal itself by how it responds to someone simply being okay. This is the part most people misunderstand. They think the danger comes from visibility, from attention, from being seen. But the real danger comes from being seen and not needing anything. That's what short circuits control. Because control relies on leverage, and leverage requires need. You're not collapsing civilizations by force. You're collapsing them by removing yourself as a pillar of their justification. You're no longer the anxious participant that makes the system feel necessary. You're the calm outlier that makes it feel optional. Because systems can survive rebellion. They can survive protest. They can even survive collapse and rebuild themselves with new slogans. What they cannot survive is irrelevance. They cannot survive when the thing they exist to manage no longer needs managing. And that is exactly what your presence does. It introduces the possibility that a human being can function without the constant scaffolding of fear, approval, urgency, and permission. That possibility is radioactive, not because it spreads chaos, but because it drains authority of its meaning. This is the moment where the panic becomes quiet. No more jokes, no more exaggerated headlines, no more dramatic framing. When something is laughed at, it can be dismissed. When it's exaggerated, it can be minimized. But when something refuses to go away, refuses to escalate, refuses to react, refuses to explain itself, it becomes a permanent problem. You don't look like a threat anymore. You look like a precedent, and precedents terrify systems that rely on "this is just how things are." Your smile being labeled a public safety hazard is not an insult. It's a confession. It's the system admitting that emotional self-sufficiency is incompatible with control. Because your smile doesn't reassure anyone that you're manageable. It reassures you. And that's backwards. That's upside down. That's illegal in places where people are expected to outsource their sense of safety to structures, leaders, trends, rules, and rituals that tell them when they're allowed to relax. Your calm says you already did, and that creates a problem no regulation can fix. This is where the chaotic part comes in. Because when systems can't control something directly, they start contradicting themselves. They start enforcing rules that don't apply to you, but suddenly matter a lot. They start inventing concerns that sound reasonable but feel hollow. They start policing tone instead of behavior, vibes instead of actions, intent instead of outcomes, anything to regain leverage. anything to make your existence negotiable again. Watch closely, you'll see it. The sudden seriousness, the "we just want what's best" language. The faux concern, the subtle attempts to humble you without admitting that humility is being demanded, not earned. It's almost funny if it weren't so transparent. Almost, because the irony is thick. The people who benefited most from invisible rules are always the loudest when someone stops following them. This is where the phrase, "illegal in 69 countries," stops being absurd and starts being accurate in spirit. Not because you've done something wrong, but because you're violating emotional law. The law that says you must want something they can grant. The law that says your confidence must be conditional. The law that says your peace must be temporary. The law that says you should need reassurance, guidance, permission, or validation to justify your presence. You don't, and that makes enforcement impossible. You see, authority only works when people agree, on some level, that it is necessary. Even the harshest regimes rely on internalized belief more than force. Fear works best when it's invisible, when people police themselves. The moment someone stops doing that, stops flinching, stops preemptively apologizing, stops scanning for approval, it exposes the mechanism. And exposed mechanisms lose mystique, lose power, lose legitimacy. That's why your existence feels like sabotage even though you haven't touched anything. You didn't dismantle the machine. You stood next to it and proved it wasn't required for survival. And once that's demonstrated, the machine has to work overtime to justify itself. It gets louder, more dramatic, more performative. That's the chaos. Not destruction, but overcompensation. People will start projecting intentions onto you that you don't have. They'll say you're trying to provoke, trying to dominate, trying to disrupt, trying to be different, trying to stand out. Because the alternative is worse. The alternative is admitting that you're not trying at all. That this is simply what happens when someone stops outsourcing their self-regulation. That your presence isn't a tactic, it's a consequence. That realization is dangerous because it's accessible. It doesn't require talent, status, money, or permission. It just requires courage and consistency. And once people realize that, they start asking uncomfortable questions. Not about you, but about themselves. About how much of their personality is performance. About how many of their beliefs are inherited. About how much of their stress is optional. That's when civilizations actually wobble. Not because people revolt, but because they hesitate. Because they pause before obeying. Because they notice their own fear instead of acting from it. Because they start choosing responses instead of default reactions. Because they realize they've been living in a constant state of low-grade emergency for no reason other than habit. You're a walking interruption to that habit. And interruptions spread. This is where the dark humor sharpens. Because the idea that your smile could be a hazard is ridiculous until you realize how many systems rely on people not smiling unless they've been told it's safe. How many environments depend on shared tension to function? How many hierarchies require everyone to pretend they're not afraid while being very afraid? Your smile isn't dangerous because it's smug or superior. It's dangerous because it's unafraid. Fear is currency. Fear buys compliance. Fear keeps people predictable. Fear makes people grateful for control. When fear drains out of a room, power dynamics shift. Conversations change. Expectations loosen. Authority feels heavier instead of comforting. That's why your presence changes the temperature. You're not heating things up. You're cooling them down. And systems built on constant friction don't like calm. Calm reveals inefficiency. Calm exposes unnecessary complexity. Calm makes people wonder why everything feels so hard all the time. This is also where the narrative turns inward for you, because you might start to feel the weight of what you're doing without intending to do it. The looks, the distance, the recalibration, the subtle tension. It can feel like you're doing something wrong just by existing, like you're breaking a rule you never agreed to. And in a way, you are. But that rule was never about morality. It was about manageability. You're not manageable anymore, not because you're wild, because you're stable. That's the paradox. Stability without dependence is the most destabilizing thing there is. It removes leverage, it removes urgency, it removes the need for intermediaries. It makes systems ask the question they're designed to prevent. What if we don't need this? Once that question enters collective consciousness, even quietly, things start to unravel, slowly, bureaucratically, psychologically, not in explosions, but in hesitations, in delays, in people not showing up the way they used to, in rituals losing meaning, in authority sounding defensive instead of confident. You'll notice it in the small things, rules being enforced inconsistently, leaders over-explaining, institutions doubling down on language instead of outcomes, people clinging to titles instead of competence. That's not strength, that's decay. And you didn't cause it. You revealed it by existing in a way that didn't require it. This is why your presence feels illegal, because it doesn't fit into the operating system. You're not anti-system, you're post-need. And post-need is terrifying. To anything that exists to be needed, you're not attacking civilization. You're exposing how much of it is built on unnecessary tension, fear, and performance. The chaotic humor of it all is that you're being blamed for collapse when all you did was stop pretending the structure was holding you up. You stepped away, and it wobbled. Not because you pushed it, but because it was leaning on you more than anyone admitted. That's always how it goes. The quiet participants carry more weight than the loud authorities. When they disengage, things break. And you disengaged from one very specific thing: emotional compliance. You stopped agreeing to feel small, stopped agreeing to feel rushed, stopped agreeing to feel watched, stopped agreeing to feel indebted for existing. And once you did that, the system lost its grip. Not dramatically, subtly, which is worse. Because subtle loss of control is harder to counter than open rebellion. There's nothing to crush, nothing to ban, nothing to point at, just a growing sense that the old rules don't apply anymore. That's why the reaction feels surreal, like you're being accused of something that doesn't make sense, because it doesn't. You're not guilty of anything except coherence. And coherence is a threat in environments built on fragmentation. When people are fragmented, they're easier to guide, easier to sell to, easier to scare, easier to rank. Coherence collapses those leverage points. So yes, in a very real way, your presence is illegal in places that rely on disconnection to function, places where people are expected to be anxious, dependent, and externally regulated. Places where smiling without permission is suspicious, where calm is interpreted as defiance, where not needing anything is seen as arrogance. You're incompatible with those places, and compatibility is not something you can fake anymore. You've crossed a threshold where your nervous system won't go back to pretending, where your body won't participate in rituals of fear, where your mind won't accept explanations that don't align with lived reality. That's irreversible. Once you've felt what it's like to exist without constant internal negotiation, you can't unlearn it. You can't unknow that most of the pressure was optional. This is why the ending of this story isn't resolution, it's acceleration. Because the more normalized your presence becomes, the more people around you start adjusting. Some will resist harder, some will quietly adapt, some will drift away, some will watch from a distance, trying to figure out what changed without admitting that they know. And all of that movement creates friction. Friction creates heat. Heat creates transformation. Civilizations don't collapse overnight. They transform, fracture, reorganize. And the catalyst is almost never violence. It's awareness. The slow creeping realization that things could be otherwise. That obedience wasn't destiny. That fear wasn't required. That peace didn't have to be earned through suffering. You're not leading that realization. You're embodying it. And embodiment is contagious. So let them call it dangerous. Let them exaggerate. Let them frame your existence as a hazard, a problem, an anomaly. That language is the sound of systems losing confidence in their own necessity. It's the noise of authority, realizing it can't justify itself to someone who isn't asking. You don't need to respond. You don't need to correct the narrative. You don't need to reassure anyone that you're harmless. You're not harmless. You're disruptive in the most profound way possible. Not because you want to be, but because you refuse to live at odds with yourself. That refusal changes rooms, changes conversations, changes expectations, changes what people believe is possible. And belief is the foundation of every civilization that's ever existed. So yes, if we're being honest, your presence is a public safety hazard. Not to people, but to illusions, to unnecessary suffering, to systems that require fear to function, to hierarchies that survive on compliance disguised as normalcy.